could you do this to me? After all these years?
People always talk about how love is supposed to grow sweeter with age. They say when you've spent decades with the same person, the bond becomes unshakable, almost sacred. That's what I believed, until the day I found out my husband of 42 years had been sneaking around with a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. Imagine yourself at 65. You've raised children, you've built a life, you've worked hard, sacrificed, put your needs second for decades. Then, just when you're supposed to finally relax, to enjoy the fruits of all those years of loyalty and effort, you discover the person you trusted most has been betraying you in the most humiliating way possible. That's where I was. My name is Margaret Turner, but most people just call me Maggie. And this is the story of how my golden years turned into ashes, and how I rose from those ashes stronger than I ever thought possible. I won't spoil the ending for you yet. Just know this. Richard thought he could humiliate me, cast me aside for a younger woman, and keep all the comfort we built together. He thought he'd get to have his fun and keep his respectability, too. But what he didn't count on was me. So sit tight, because by the time I'm done telling you this story, you'll either want to hug me or you'll want to stand up and cheer for what I did. Richard and I got married in 1980. We were young, hopeful, and full of plans. He was ambitious, I was supportive, and together we built a solid life. We bought a modest house in Connecticut, raised 2 children, Anna and Michael, and later celebrated the arrival of our grandchildren. Our life wasn't perfect, of course, whose is? But it was stable, safe. He had a good job in finance. I worked part-time at a library, and in between we built a home full of traditions. Friday dinners, Sunday church, Christmas mornings with everyone in matching pajamas. We became that couple everyone pointed to as the example. For decades, I believed in that image. I believed in him. But then, things began to change. At first, it was little things. He started caring about his appearance more. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't upset about that. After all, who doesn't like seeing their husband take pride in himself? But it wasn't the usual, I'm just trying to stay healthy kind of thing. No, Richard went from a man who was content with khakis and golf shirts to someone suddenly obsessed with slim-fit jeans, designer sneakers, and hair dye. Imagine your 65-year-old husband suddenly buying cologne that smells like it belongs in a nightclub. I remember the first time I noticed. He came home one evening with a bag from an expensive boutique in the city. He pulled out a leather jacket, sleek, modern, way too trendy for a man his age. I laughed, thinking he was joking. "Who are you trying to impress?" I teased. He chuckled, but there was something forced in his smile. "Just wanted to update my look, Maggie. Stay young." I didn't think much of it then, but little by little, the pieces started to pile up. His phone, for example. For years, Richard barely knew how to send a text. Suddenly, he was glued to it, fingers flying faster than I'd ever seen. He became protective of it, too, angling the screen away, setting up a password, keeping it face down at dinner. And the gym. Oh, the gym. Richard had never been a fitness fanatic. He golfed, sure, but that was more about beers with his buddies than exercise. Yet suddenly he was hitting the gym 5 times a week. "Gotta stay healthy," he said. But when I asked if I could join him, he brushed me off. "You wouldn't like it. It's too intense." Imagine hearing that after 40 years of marriage. Too intense for me? Since when did Richard know what was too intense for me? The distance grew quietly. It wasn't just physical, though that too. It was in the way he stopped asking about my day, the way his eyes glazed over when I spoke about the grandkids, the way he lingered in front of the mirror, adjusting his shirt, brushing back his dyed hair with a self-consciousness that felt foreign. But the human heart is stubborn. I wanted to believe the best. I told myself he was just going through some kind of late-life crisis, a harmless phase. After all, what could possibly tempt a man in his 60s to jeopardize everything we had built? I didn't realize, not yet, that temptation had a name. Chloe Miller. At first heard her name in passing. Richard mentioned her one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. "Had lunch with Chloe today," he said casually. I frowned. "Chloe?" "New consultant at the firm," he explained too quickly. "Fresh ideas, lots of new ideas." Right. I brushed it off, but the name stuck in my head. Something about the way he said it. Too light, too practiced. Then it became a pattern. Chloe this, Chloe that. She thought the quarterly report was innovative. She recommended a new restaurant. She laughed at his jokes. Every time her name crossed his lips, I felt a little jolt of unease. Still, I pushed it down. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Richard was 65. Chloe, from what I gathered, was in her 30s. It was ridiculous, wasn't it? But deep down, my gut was screaming. One night, I decided to test him. We were sitting in the living room, and I said, casually, "You talk about Chloe a lot. She must be really special." For a split second, he froze. His eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Panic? Then he forced a laugh. "Oh, she's just a coworker, Maggie. Don't be silly." But you know that feeling when the air shifts, when the truth is hiding just beneath the surface? I felt it then. Imagine sitting across from the man you've loved your whole life and realizing you no longer recognize the look in his eyes. The signs became impossible to ignore. Business trips that didn't make sense, receipts for dinners at places I'd never been invited to, a faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his shirt collar. And then there was the birthday card. I found it one afternoon while doing laundry. Tucked into his jacket pocket was a small envelope decorated with glittery hearts. Inside, in looping handwriting, it read, "To my Richard, thank you for making me feel alive. Forever yours, Chloe." My blood ran cold. Imagine holding proof of betrayal in your hands after 42 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and faith. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at that card, shaking so hard I thought I might break. A million memories flooded my mind. Every anniversary, every Christmas, every quiet morning sipping coffee together. Were they all lies? I wanted to scream, to march downstairs and throw that glittery little lie in his smug face. But instead, I slipped the card back where I found it.
Why? Because I realized something important. If Richard was bold enough to keep evidence like that in his pocket, then this wasn't some harmless flirtation. No, this was serious. And if it was serious, I needed proof. Now, imagine yourself in my place. You're 65 years old. Your husband has just betrayed you after 4 decades together. Do you act impulsively, risk being dismissed as paranoid? Or do you take your time, gather every shred of evidence, and make sure when you finally move, there's no escape for him? I chose the second. The next day, I started small. I paid attention to his routines, to his phone, to the way he suddenly guarded his laptop like it contained nuclear secrets. Richard had always been careless with his electronics. Passwords? Please. He used Gulf 123 for years. But now, he had fingerprints, Face ID, the works. That was red flag number 1. Red flag number 2 came during dinner with our daughter Anna. We were at her house, celebrating her son Josh's birthday. Everyone was laughing, eating cake, when Richard excused himself to take a call. I watched him step outside, pacing the yard, speaking in that low, hushed tone people use when they know they're guilty. When he came back, I asked lightly, "Who was that?" He hesitated. "Work. Work. On a Saturday. At your grandson's birthday party." "Sure, Richard. Sure." From then on, I became a detective. And let me tell you, 65 doesn't mean weak. I might not move as fast as I did at 25, but my mind, sharp as ever. I started checking his pockets when he showered. Sometimes I found receipts, sometimes gum wrappers. But once, I found a hotel key card. Imagine that. Finding a hotel key card in your husband's pants pocket when he swore he was working late at the office. My hand shook as I held it, but I slipped it back carefully. I couldn't let him know I was on to him. I also started listening. Late at night when he thought I was asleep, I'd hear the faint click of his phone. Sometimes he'd sneak into the bathroom, whispering in the dark. One night, I cracked the door open just enough to catch his reflection in the mirror. His face lit up by the glow of the screen, smiling that smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. And I knew. He was talking to her. I didn't have the tools young people have now. No spyware, no hacking apps. But I had patience, and I had instincts. So I started writing everything down. Times he left, excuses he gave, the strange receipts I found, the way his shirt sometimes smelled faintly of floral perfume. Page by page, my little notebook filled up, and the more I wrote, the angrier I became. Because here's the thing. Richard wasn't just betraying me. He was betraying our children, our grandchildren, our entire legacy. 42 years together, and he was ready to throw it all away for some woman half his age who batted her eyelashes and laughed at his stupid jokes. Imagine giving someone your best years, your youth, your loyalty, and then realizing you've been replaced by someone who still shops in the junior section. One afternoon, I got my first solid lead. Richard left his laptop open in the kitchen. Normally, he was careful, but maybe he thought he trained me too well, the loyal wife who never snooped. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. I slid into the chair, heart pounding, and opened his email. Password protected, of course, but remember what I said? Richard was careless for decades. So I tried his old standby, Gulf 123. And just like that, I was in. My stomach dropped as I scrolled. There were dozens of emails from Chloe. Some professional, but most far from it. Can't wait to see you tonight. Thinking of you, handsome. I love how you make me feel. Love. She used the word love. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room, but instead I forwarded the emails to myself, quietly, methodically. Proof. The next piece of the puzzle came by accident. Richard claimed he had a conference in New York. He packed a suitcase, kissed me on the cheek, and left. But something told me to check the calendar, so I did. And guess what? No conference. None. I knew then I couldn't just sit at home anymore. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I did something I never thought I'd do at my age. I followed him. I waited until he left the house the next week, dressed to the nines in that ridiculous leather jacket, and I trailed behind him in my old Honda.
My hands were sweating, my heart racing like I was in some spy movie. He drove into the city, parked near a hotel. And there she was, Chloe. I recognized her instantly from the company Christmas party years back. Long blonde hair, legs for days, barely 30 if that. She squealed when she saw him, running into his arms like a teenager. And Richard, my Richard, kissed her like he hadn't kissed me in decades. Imagine standing in your car, gripping the steering wheel so hard your knuckles turned white, watching the man who promised you forever hold another woman like you don't even exist. That image burned into me. And right then, my grief hardened into something else. Resolve. That night, I didn't confront him. No. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and started planning. Because now I had everything I needed. Emails, receipts, photos on my phone from the hotel parking lot, proof beyond denial. But I wasn't just going to confront him and let him cry crocodile tears. Oh no, that would be too easy, too merciful. I wanted justice. I wanted revenge. And I wanted it to be unforgettable. So I asked myself, what does Richard value most? His reputation, his money, his comfort. He thought he could humiliate me and still keep all of that. But what if I could take it from him, piece by piece, until there was nothing left? I looked at myself in the mirror that night. My 65-year-old reflection stared back. Wrinkles, gray hairs, soft lines. But behind those eyes, a fire had been lit. And I whispered to my reflection, he has no idea who he's messing with. Do you know what the hardest part was after seeing Richard with Chloe outside that hotel? It wasn't the betrayal itself. It wasn't even the humiliation of knowing I'd been traded in for someone half my age. No, the hardest part was pretending I didn't know. Imagine it. You watch your husband embrace another woman, kiss her like he kissed you on your wedding day, and then hours later, he walks into your house like nothing happened. He sits at your dinner table, compliments your roast chicken, and asks about your day. I had to smile. I had to nod. I had to play the part of the loving, oblivious wife. And let me tell you, that nearly killed me. But I knew if I blew it too soon, he'd have time to prepare. He'd hide the money. He'd spin lies to our children. He'd make me look like the crazy old woman who couldn't accept reality. I couldn't let that happen. I had to be smarter. So I started planning. And when I say planning, I mean every detail. Step 1, I needed to know where I stood legally. I'd never set foot in a lawyer's office before. But one Tuesday morning, while Richard was at work, I marched myself into a sleek downtown law firm. The receptionist raised an eyebrow at me, this silver-haired woman in sensible shoes, clutching a notebook. But I didn't care. I met with a lawyer named Deborah Klein, sharp, confident, maybe in her 50s, the kind of woman who looked like she'd eaten men like Richard for breakfast. She said, "Tell me everything." And I did. I spilled it all, the emails, the hotel key, the photos from my phone from the hotel parking lot. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. "Maggie, if what you've told me checks out, you're in an excellent position. After 42 years of marriage, you're entitled to half of everything, more, depending on how the assets are structured. And if he's been spending marital funds on this Chloe, we can make a case for financial misconduct." Financial misconduct. I liked the sound of that. Step 2. I needed to make sure Richard wouldn't see it coming. That meant playing the long game, acting sweet, acting supportive, asking about his long days at the office, pretending not to notice when he came home smelling faintly of Chloe's perfume. It was torture,
But every time I felt my rage bubbling up, I thought of my end game. Because here's the thing, and I want you to really picture this. Richard had built his entire identity on being respected. He was the family man, the successful professional, the grandfather everyone admired. He thought he was untouchable. What he didn't realize was that I was about to pull the rug out from under him. Step 3. I had to gather more evidence. Now, don't underestimate me just because of my age. I may be 65, but I can Google like the best of them. I learned about phone tracking apps, about hidden cameras, about all sorts of little tricks. One afternoon, when Richard left his phone unattended for once, I slipped it into my hand. Heart pounding, I installed a discreet tracking app and set it back down before he even noticed. From then on, I knew where he went. Every late night at the office, every business trip. And guess what? 90% of the time, he was either at Chloe's apartment or at some hotel. I even drove past her building once just to see, and sure enough, there was his car parked out front. The audacity. Step 4. I needed allies. Now, I couldn't exactly tell Anna and Michael everything yet. If I confronted Richard too soon, he might twist their loyalties. But I could lay the groundwork. So I started talking to them more, inviting them over, making sure they saw how much I was still the glue of the family. With Anna, I dropped little hints. Your father's been so busy lately. I hardly see him anymore. With Michael, I laughed it off. Your dad's going through a midlife crisis, buying new clothes, spending more time out. Men, right? They both chuckled, but I saw the flicker of concern in their eyes. Seeds planted. Because when the truth finally came out, I needed them to believe me. All the while, Richard had no idea. He strutted around like some peacock, dyeing his hair darker, hitting the gym, even whitening his teeth. One evening, he came home wearing a shirt I'd never seen before. Slim fit, navy blue. Probably cost more than I'd spend in a month. How do I look? He asked, posing like some kind of model. I forced a smile. Handsome as ever. But inside I was boiling. Because every new shirt, every dinner receipt, every hotel stay, it was all bought with our money. Money we were supposed to use for retirement, for travel, for spoiling the grandkids. Instead, he was burning it on Chloe. And that gave me an idea. Step 5. Follow the money. With Deborah's help, I began pulling records, bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, and let me tell you, Richard was sloppy. Over the past year, he'd spent thousands on Chloe. Jewelry, trips, rent payments, even a down payment on a car. I photocopied everything, filed it neatly in a binder, proof of his betrayal, not just of me, but of our family's finances. Deborah smiled when she saw it. This is gold. Judges don't take kindly to spouses wasting marital assets on affairs. This will play very well in court. Court, just the word made me shiver, but in a good way. Because for once, I wouldn't be the one humiliated. He would. And yet, I didn't want to stop there. No, court would handle the legal side, but emotionally, publicly, I wanted him exposed. So, I began crafting the perfect moment. A gathering, a celebration, somewhere Richard would feel secure, admired, and then, boom, the truth. Now, I won't tell you exactly what I had planned yet. You'll have to wait, just like Richard had to wait for his reckoning. But trust me, it would be unforgettable. In the meantime, I took care of myself. You see, when you've been married for decades, it's easy to forget yourself, to put your own needs last. But once I started planning my revenge, something changed in me.
I got a haircut. I bought new clothes. I joined a yoga class at the community center. Not because I thought it would win Richard back, oh no, he was already gone, but because I wanted to remind myself that I was more than his wife. I was Maggie, strong, independent, and I wasn't going to let him take my dignity with him. And guess what? People noticed. Friends complimented me. Even Anna said, "Mom, you look amazing lately." That gave me fuel. Meanwhile, Richard kept digging his own grave. One Saturday, he told me he was going golfing with friends, but thanks to my tracking app, I knew exactly where he went: Chloe's apartment. So I drove by, parked across the street, and waited. Hours later, they came out, laughing, arms around each other, Chloe wearing a new necklace I recognized from our credit card bill. I snapped photo after photo. Imagine the satisfaction of capturing in living color the betrayal he thought he'd hidden. That night, when he came home smelling faintly of her perfume, I smiled sweetly and asked, "How was golf?" He grinned. "Great. Hit a few birdies." I almost laughed. If only he knew how much I already had on him. But I didn't laugh. I just poured him a drink, kissed his cheek, and tucked my binder of evidence a little deeper into the drawer. Because the trap was set, and soon it would spring shut. You know what people say about patience being a virtue? Well, let me tell you, patience is also a weapon. And at 65, after raising children, putting up with in-laws, and surviving a 42-year marriage, I had more patience than Richard could ever dream of. By the time summer rolled around, I had everything I needed. The emails, the receipts, the photos, the binder thicker than a church Bible. But evidence wasn't enough for me. I didn't want just a quiet divorce. I wanted a spectacle. I wanted Richard to feel the same humiliation he'd forced on me, only 10 times worse. So I began to plan the stage. Literally. Family was everything to Richard. Or at least he liked people to think it was. He loved being the center of attention at Christmas, the head of the table at Thanksgiving, the proud patriarch at birthdays. It was all about image with him. So I thought, what better place to expose him than in front of the very people whose respect he craved most? That's when the idea struck me. A family gathering. Nothing unusual, nothing that would arouse suspicion, just a simple barbecue at our house, with Anna, Michael, the grandkids, maybe even a couple of close friends. And then, in the middle of it all, when Richard was relaxed and basking in his little performance of being the loving husband and grandfather, I dropped the bomb. But first, I needed to make sure my children were on my side. So, little by little, I began nudging the truth out. Not the whole truth. Not yet. Just enough to prepare them. One afternoon, I had tea with Anna on her porch while the kids played in the yard. "Your father's been different lately, hasn't he?" I said, stirring my tea slowly. She looked at me concerned. I've noticed he seems distracted. Is everything okay? I forced a smile. Oh, I'm sure it's just a phase. Men get restless sometimes. She frowned. At 65? Exactly, sweetheart. Exactly.
Later, with Michael, I was even more direct. Your dad's been spending a lot of money lately. New clothes, fancy dinners. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Michael shrugged, but I saw the doubt forming. Now that you mention it, yeah, it doesn't really sound like him. Seeds planted, roots starting to grow. Meanwhile, Deborah, my lawyer, was helping me craft the perfect financial angle. Timing is everything, she reminded me. Once we file, he'll scramble. But if you've already got the family on your side, it'll be harder for him to twist the story. That woman was brilliant. She knew exactly how men like Richard operated. Deny, deflect, blame the wife. But with the mountain of evidence I'd gathered and the audience I was preparing, Richard wouldn't stand a chance. Imagine the satisfaction of knowing your opponent is about to walk straight into the trap you've spent months building. At home, I played my part flawlessly. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about his long days at work. I even ironed his shirts before his supposed golf trips. And the whole time, I was watching him. He'd hum to himself in the mornings, texting Chloe under the table while sipping his coffee. Sometimes I'd catch his reflection in the window smiling at a message. Do you know what that smile did to me? It hurt, yes, but it also fueled me because I knew that soon, very soon, that smile would disappear. One evening, as he was showering, I slipped into his study. On his desk was a leather notebook he always kept close. Normally, I wouldn't touch it, but desperate times, right? Inside were notes, dates, reminders, and there it was. Dinner with C. Weekend away, pack bag. I snapped photos with my phone, heart pounding, hands trembling. He was so careless. Or maybe he just thought I was too blind to notice, too old, too naive, too dependent. Oh, Richard, if only you knew. Finally, the day of the barbecue came. I spent the morning preparing, marinating chicken, slicing vegetables, setting up tables in the backyard. From the outside, I was just a grandmother excited to host a family. Inside, I was rehearsing my lines like an actress before opening night. Richard, of course, was in high spirits. He loved being the host, showing off his grill, pouring drinks. He wore that ridiculous leather jacket again, preening like a man half his age. As the guests arrived, Anna and her kids, Michael and his wife, a couple of neighbors, Richard strutted around, shaking hands, cracking jokes. And I watched. I waited. Now here's the thing. I could have exposed him right then and there. Pulled out the photos, the emails, read Chloe's love notes aloud. But that would have been too easy, too abrupt. No. I wanted him to feel it, to sense the walls closing in, to look into the eyes of his family as the truth shattered his perfect little image. So I decided to ease into it. While everyone ate, I raised my glass. I just want to say how grateful I am for this family. After 42 years of marriage, I've learned a lot about love, loyalty, and betrayal. Richard froze. I saw his hand tighten around his fork. The kids laughed nervously, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't joking. I let the silence hang in the air for just a second too long before I smiled sweetly and changed the subject. And in that moment, Richard knew. He didn't know how much I knew, but he knew I knew something. His face paled, his appetite vanished, and I could see the sweat beating at his temples. Oh, how I savored that. That night, after everyone left, he confronted me. "What was that toast about?" he demanded, his voice low, tight. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." I shrugged, just speaking from the heart. He stared at me, searching for clues, but I gave him nothing. Just a calm smile, a kiss on the cheek, and a simple, "Good night, Richard." Inside, I was laughing because the fear in his eyes told me I was winning. Over the next few weeks, I ramped it up. Little comments here and there, subtle hints in front of the kids, a stray remark about loyalty when we were with friends. Every time, Richard flinched. And Chloe? Oh, Chloe had no idea. She thought she'd won, that she was the future Mrs. Turner, that she'd climbed her way into comfort and security. But what she didn't realize was that she'd tethered herself to a sinking ship. One evening, I met Deborah again. She spread out the documents I'd gathered across her desk. "This is airtight," she said, tapping the photos of Richard and Chloe outside the hotel. "When you're ready, we'll file. But remember, once you pull the trigger, there's no going back." I nodded. I'm ready, more ready than I've ever been. But deep down, I knew I wanted one more moment, one last, unforgettable scene. Because divorce papers are powerful, yes, but humiliation, public, undeniable humiliation, that's eternal. So I planned the final gathering, bigger than a barbecue this time, a milestone celebration, our 43rd wedding anniversary. Everyone would be there. The kids, the grandkids, friends, neighbors, and Richard, thinking he was about to be celebrated, adored, lifted up as the devoted husband of over 4 decades. And that's when I'd destroy him. Not just with evidence, not just with words, but with a revelation so sharp it would slice through the lies he'd spun. Imagine it, a room full of people raising glasses in his honor, and then the truth crashing down like a tidal wave. That image kept me going. That image gave me strength. And as I looked in the mirror that night, adjusting my new dress, smoothing back my freshly styled hair, I whispered again to myself, he has no idea who he's messing with. I want you to imagine this. You've been married for 43 years. Your friends, your children, your grandchildren, everyone gathers around to celebrate the life you've built. You're sitting at the head of the table, soaking in all that admiration. Now imagine that at that exact moment, the person you thought you deceived walks in and strips away every layer of your lie, piece by piece, until you're standing naked in front of the people you love most. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, reputationally. That's what I had planned for Richard. The anniversary party was his idea, of course. He loved celebrations, especially ones centered around him. "Let's make it big this year, Maggie," he'd said, eyes twinkling. 43 years together, it's not something everyone can say. He had no idea he was planning his own funeral. Not a real one, but the death of his reputation, his marriage, his dignity. The guest list was long. Anna and Michael with their families, some old friends from church, a few neighbors, even Richard's golf buddies. He wanted it at the community hall with a catered dinner and a DJ. Perfect. A bigger stage, a bigger audience. For weeks, I prepared in silence, while Richard rehearsed his speech about lasting love and sacrifice. I was organizing my arsenal, a slideshow of family photos with a few special additions, printed copies of Chloe's emails folded neatly inside envelopes for each guest, audio recordings of his phone calls with her, burned onto a CD and labeled simply Truth. It was cruel, maybe, ruthless. But tell me, after 43 years of loyalty, after raising his children and nursing his wounds, after sacrificing my youth so he could chase his dreams, didn't he deserve a little cruelty? The night of the party, I dressed carefully. A deep blue dress that hugged me in all the right places, pearls at my neck, hair perfectly styled. I looked like a woman in control, not a victim. And when I walked into that hall, heads turned. Even Richard looked at me differently, almost startled. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. I smiled. "Thank you, Richard." Little did he know, that kiss would be the last gesture of affection he'd ever give me. Dinner was served. Laughter filled the room. Richard held court at the head table, telling stories from our youth, cracking jokes, playing the charming husband. I played along. I laughed at his jokes, squeezed his hand, poured him wine. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. But inside, I was counting down. Then came the speeches. Anna went first, talking about what an inspiration our marriage was. Michael followed, recalling childhood memories. I smiled through it all, but my heart was pounding. Finally, it was Richard's turn. He stood tall, tapping his glass. 43 years with the love of my life, he began, his voice strong. Maggie, you've been my rock, my partner, my everything. Through thick and thin, we've built a life I wouldn't trade for the world. Oh, the hypocrisy. He rambled on about loyalty, about family, about honor. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but I let him speak. I let him dig the hole deeper. And when he finally sat down, basking in applause, I knew it was my moment. I stood, glass in hand. "Thank you, everyone," I said, smiling warmly. "I want to say how grateful I am to be surrounded by family and friends tonight. 43 years, it's been a journey. And like every journey, it's had its ups and downs." Richard shifted in his seat. "But you know, marriage is about truth, about trust. And sometimes the truth has a way of finding its voice, even when people try to silence it." I nodded toward the projector screen. The slideshow began. At first it was innocent. Photos of our wedding, the kids growing up, family vacations. People smiled, laughed, wiped tears. And then the tone shifted. A photo of Richard at a fancy restaurant holding Chloe's hand across the table. Gasps filled the room. Another photo, the two of them entering a hotel together. Murmurs spread. And then the emails projected big and bold. "I can't wait to spend forever with you, Chloe. Maggie doesn't understand me like you do." The room fell silent. Richard jumped up. "Turn it off. This is fake." But it was too late. Everyone had seen. I held up my hand. Wait, there's more. I pressed play on the audio. Richard's voice filled the hall, intimate, low, unmistakable. "I wish Maggie would just let me go. I only stay because of the money. With you, Chloe, I feel alive again." Gasps turned into outrage. Anna covered her mouth. Michael stood up, fists clenched. The grandchildren stared, confused. And Richard? He stood frozen, pale as death. eyes darting like a trapped animal. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady. For 43 years, I gave this man everything. I stood by him, raised his children, sacrificed my dreams so he could have his. And this is how he repays me? With lies, with betrayal, with a woman half his age. I looked at Chloe, who'd slipped into the back of the hall. Yes, she'd come, bold enough to attend, smug enough to think she was untouchable. I pointed straight at her. And this is the woman who thought she could take my place. All eyes turned, whispers rippled through the room. Chloe flushed crimson, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of everyone's judgment. Richard tried to speak. "Maggie, please." But I cut him off. "No, Richard, you don't get to speak tonight. Not anymore." I reached under the table, pulling out a stack of envelopes. "These," I said, handing them out, "are copies of the emails, the receipts, the proof, so no one can say they didn't see it with their own eyes." The room erupted. Some guests whispered in shock, others shook their heads in disgust. Anna was crying, Michael had stormed out, and Richard just stood there, trembling. And then I delivered the final blow. "I want you all to know, this marriage is over. Tomorrow, I'll be filing for divorce. And thanks to the evidence I've collected and the incredible work of my lawyer, I'll be walking away with everything. The house, the accounts, the pension." Gasped again. Richard staggered, as if the words had physically struck him. "You see," I continued, my voice cold now, "he stayed with me for the money. Well, guess what, Richard? The money's mine now. All of it. And you? You'll be left with nothing. Not even her. Because Chloe?" I smirked. "She doesn't want a broke old man. Do you, darling?" Chloe's face drained of color. She turned on her heel and walked out, not even glancing back at him. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard collapsed into a chair, head in his hands, broken. And I stood tall, strong, triumphant. I raised my glass one last time to 43 years and to freedom. Mine. The room erupted in applause. Not for him, for me. And in that moment, I felt lighter than I had in decades, because I'd won. Do you know what freedom feels like when you've been chained for decades? It's like walking outside after a storm. The air feels sharper, cleaner. The sky seems bigger. Every breath is a reminder that you survived, and not just survived, but won. That's what it felt like the morning after the anniversary massacre. Richard didn't come home that night. I heard later he checked into a cheap motel across town, alone. Chloe had abandoned him the second she realized the money was gone, just like I predicted. I slept like a baby. For the first time in years, I didn't toss and turn wondering where he was, who he was with, or what lies he'd tell me in the morning. No, I woke up refreshed, stretched wide in the bed, and thought, this is mine now. My life, my space, my time. And God, it felt good. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Deborah, my lawyer, worked her magic. With all the evidence I'd collected, the receipts, the photos, the recordings, the divorce was swift and brutal. Richard's attempts to fight were laughable. He claimed I'd fabricated evidence. He begged for leniency. He even tried to charm the judge. But the judge wasn't buying it, not after hearing Richard's own voice on those recordings. In the end, I got everything. The house, the accounts, the pension. Richard was left with a few personal belongings and whatever pride he could scrape together, which wasn't much. But here's the part I want you to hear, because it's the most important. I didn't just win legally, I won spiritually, emotionally. I stopped living like a ghost in my own life. I started living like Maggie again. First, I took care of myself. I joined a fitness class at the YMCA. At first, I was nervous. Me, a 65-year-old surrounded by younger people bouncing around like Energizer bunnies. But you know what? I kept up. Slowly, then faster. Week after week, my body grew stronger. I cut my hair into a stylish bob, bought new clothes that made me feel radiant. I even got a professional photo shoot done, something I'd never done in my life. When I saw the pictures, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Confident, elegant, alive. Friends started commenting, "Maggie, you look 10 years younger." Even strangers noticed. A barista at the local cafe flirted with me one morning. Can you imagine? Flirted with me at 65. I walked out of that cafe with the biggest smile on my face, not because I was looking for love, but because I realized I still had it. I'd never really lost it. Richard just couldn't see it. Meanwhile, Richard. Oh, poor Richard. Word of his affair spread fast after the party. Small towns are like that. News travels quicker than wildfire.
His golf buddies stopped inviting him out. The neighbors whispered when he walked by. Even his grandchildren avoided him, confused and hurt by what he'd done to me. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe moved on within weeks, found herself a younger man, probably closer to her own age. Richard was left high and dry. Without me, he couldn't keep up the facade. He stopped dyeing his hair, stopped dressing sharp. He looked older overnight, as if the affair had been the only thing keeping him propped up. I ran into him once, months later, outside the grocery store. He looked broken, sunken eyes, wrinkled shirt, a plastic bag clutched in his hand. "Maggie," he said, his voice weak, "can we talk?" I smiled politely. "There's nothing left to say, Richard." And then I walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, head held high. It was the sweetest sound in the world. With my finances secure, I began exploring passions I'd put off for decades. I signed up for an art class, painting, something I'd always wanted to try. My hands trembled the first time I held a brush, but soon I found myself lost in colors, in shapes, in the joy of creating something just for me. I joined a book club, met new friends, even traveled. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, places Richard had always promised we'd go someday, but never did. Well, someday had finally come, and I didn't need him to enjoy it. But here's the twist. One evening, at a community fundraiser, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years, Thomas, an old college friend. Widowed, kind, with a warm smile that made me feel like I was 20 again. We talked for hours about books, travel, family. He made me laugh until my sides ached. For the first time in decades, I felt a flutter in my chest. Not the desperate, anxious kind of love I'd clung to with Richard. No, this was different, gentle, easy. We started meeting for coffee, then dinners, and before I knew it, Thomas became a part of my life, not filling a void, but adding joy to the life I'd already rebuilt for myself. And guess what? He loved me exactly as I was. Wrinkles, silver hair, laugh lines. He said I'd never looked more beautiful. Do you see it now? Richard thought he could break me. He thought he could trade me in for a younger model, toss me aside like yesterday's newspaper. But instead, he broke himself. He lost his family, his money, his dignity. And me, I came out stronger, freer, more alive than ever before. Sometimes I sit on my porch in the evening, sipping a glass of wine, watching the sunset, and I think back to that girl I once was, the girl who sacrificed everything for a man who didn't deserve it. If I could speak to her now, I'd say, don't be afraid. Don't hold back. You're stronger than you think, and one day you'll rise higher than you ever imagined. Because here's the truth, my friends. Betrayal doesn't define you. What you do after betrayal, that's what shapes you. And me? I chose revenge. I chose freedom. I chose me. So if you're listening to my story tonight, maybe shaking your head, maybe imagining yourself in my place, ask yourself, what would you do? Would you let betrayal destroy you? Or would you turn it into fuel like me? Because trust me, nothing tastes sweeter than walking away with everything while the one who hurt you is left with nothing. And as for Richard, well, last I heard, he's still in that dingy motel, living off Social Security, bitter and alone. Me, I'm planning a trip to Greece with Thomas this fall. Funny how life works out, isn't it? I raise my glass to you, my dear listener. To freedom, to strength, to never settling for less than you deserve. And most of all, to rising from the ashes. Because sometimes the end of a marriage isn't the end of your life. Sometimes it's the beginning.